Okay, so we've got a big pile here.
Yeah, it's quite a stack.
A stack of info about Canada's border security and its connection to the immigration system.
It really
It
is.
looks like we've got news releases, backgrounders,
Oh, yeah.
even a progress report. A whole 9 yards here.
We're going deep.
So it looks like Canada's really serious about upping their border control and immigration management game here.
Yeah.
And they're working pretty closely with the U.S. on this, too.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating to me is how Canada's kind of weaving together all these different things like policy changes and tech upgrades and international collaboration.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really kind of multi-layered approach that's designed to be adaptable and, you know, proactive.
So where do we even begin with all this?
Hmm.
Well, Canada released this really comprehensive border plan
Right.
back in December 2024,
Hmm.
and they're putting their money where their mouth is with this one. They're backing it with a $1.3 billion investment.
Yeah.
So this isn't just some casual upgrade, right?
Right.
This is a full-on commitment to securing their borders and their future.
And it's not just about like, keeping people out right.
Right.
The plan really hones in on like 5 key areas.
Right here.
So it's disrupting the flow of fentanyl into the country and then equipping law enforcement with all these new tools and then better coordinating the efforts between all the different agencies and then information sharing more effectively and then minimizing unnecessary traffic to the border.
Okay, so let's talk fentanyl.
Okay.
I mean, this is a massive issue, right?
It is.
And Canada's border plan is really tackling it head on.
Hmm.
They're not just like beefing up security at entry points. They're trying to like dismantle the fentanyl trade from like multiple angles.
Yeah, and they're bringing in all this new technology, so
Mhm.
like AI and imaging tech at the borders to detect drugs more effectively.
Mm.
And they're training more canine teams, and they're using chemical detection tools at high-risk entry points.
I was also really surprised to learn that they're even establishing a Canadian drug profiling center.
Yeah, that's
Right.
a big one.
So they can like analyze fentanyl trends and they can build, stronger cases against these traffickers, and they're expanding regional lab capacity so they can support even more investigations.
That's right. And, they've also created a specialized unit, like the Chemical Precursor Risk Management Unit, to
Yeah.
like monitor all those chemicals that are used to actually make fentanyl in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's really about, disrupting that supply chain right at the source, a very proactive strategy.
So they're thinking ahead.
Yeah.
They're trying to predict and prevent the problem before it even reaches their border.
Yeah,
Like they're playing chess, not just whack-a-mole, right?
exactly. And, this highlights how border security is about so much more than just, stopping people.
Mm.
It's really about safeguarding public health, and it's about disrupting all these criminal networks that are, exploiting global supply chains.
Right. And speaking of like high-tech solutions, the RCMP is rolling out some seriously impressive new hardware as part of their aerial intelligence task force.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one, too. We're talking about helicopters, drones, mobile surveillance towers.
Wow.
They're even using counter-drone technology
Oh, wow.
to address the growing use of drones by, criminal organizations.
So they're covering like the ground, the air, and with the new legislation requiring port owners to provide space for CBSA export inspections, they're even tightening control over the goods leaving the country.
So that 247 surveillance between ports of entry, that's huge.
Yeah.
It allows them to keep an eye on areas that were previously more difficult to monitor.
So it's a super comprehensive approach. Like they're weaving this security blanket across the whole country,
Right,
but they're not doing this alone.
right. No, definitely not.
Collaboration, especially with the U.S., is a huge part of Canada's strategy.
Yeah, they share a massive border, so they kind of have to work together, right?
Makes sense.
Increased information sharing, all those illegal interceptions, that helps them to really target individuals who are trying to game the system.
Right. And this whole data sharing thing, it's like a force multiplier. Yeah.
Helps them identify patterns and trends so they can be more proactive with their enforcement efforts.
Exactly. And they're also boosting their on-the-ground capacity as well.
Okay.
So they're creating these 3 regional hubs that'll bring together federal, provincial, even local law enforcement officers.
So having everybody on the same page, right?
Yeah,
Breaking down those silos between agencies, that's got to help a lot, right?
for sure. It allows for a much more unified response.
Mm-hmm.
And there's even a proposal on the table for like a North American Joint Strike Force
Oh, wow.
to really, target that transnational organized crime.
That's big.
Yeah, it really kind of highlights how, security threats are changing. They're becoming more complex and they're more interconnected than ever before.
Right.
So it really demands a multinational response.
So Canada's tightening its own border. They're collaborating closely with the U.S., and they're potentially joining forces to take on organized crime at a continental level.
Yeah.
They're not messing around.
And this is where we see the strategic thinking behind it all.
They're not just reacting to threats. They're anticipating them.
Right.
And they're building the systems to counter them effectively.
But it's not just about, cracking down on things.
Right.
Right. Canada is also trying to streamline border processes and make things more efficient.
Yeah, make it easier for everybody.
Remember to flag polling.
Oh, yeah, flag polling.
Yeah.
The, temporary residents briefly leaving Canada and then coming right back in just to get immigration services.
Right.
It was such a loophole. And it was just straining resources,
Yeah.
On both sides of the border.
Yeah.
And it was causing all these unnecessary delays for everybody.
And thankfully, they finally shut that down in December 2024.
Yeah.
No more flag polling.
So win-win,
Yeah.
It frees up resources, it reduces traffic, and it just makes things smoother for those crossing the border legally.
Right. It seems like they're really serious about creating a more controlled and efficient border system,
Yeah.
but they're also trying to uphold, their humanitarian obligations. And this is where the Safe Third Country Agreement comes in, right?
The STCA.
Yeah. Or STCA with the U.S.
Right. The STCA, it plays a big role in managing all those asylum claims.
Right.
It basically requires people to seek asylum in the first safe country they enter, so either Canada or the U.S.
So, if you were entering Canada from the U.S.,
Right.
Yeah. You wouldn't be able to claim asylum in Canada under the STCA because the U.S. is considered a safe country.
Exactly.
Right.
The idea is to prevent what they call asylum shopping, and it's meant to make sure that claims are processed fairly and efficiently.
Okay.
However, the SDCA has faced some challenges in court,
Okay.
and how it's applied can be tricky,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about, vulnerable individuals or those with specific protection needs.
It's a really complex piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
and definitely one that's sparked a lot of debate and analysis. But the STCA is just one part of this broader strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
To strengthen Canada's immigration system.
That's right. They're taking this multi-pronged approach to maintain what they call immigration integrity.
Okay.
So it's about, reducing fraud, making sure the applications are legitimate, and managing the influx of temporary residents.
So one of the first things they did was implement a partial visa requirement
Right.
for Mexican nationals back in February 2024.
That was a big one.
It was a direct response to that surge in asylum claims from Mexico. And a lot of them were deemed unfounded.
A lot of them, yeah.
And the impact was pretty immediate.
Oh, yeah.
Asylum claims from Mexican nationals dropped like a rock.
Huge drop.
And it didn't stop there.
Nope.
They've also stepped up the scrutiny of visitor visa applications from countries with higher rates of abuse.
Right.
So they're using this new fraud detection system to flag those potentially problematic applications.
Yeah, catch them early.
And the data shows it's working.
Yeah, it is.
Illegal U.S. crossings by foreign nationals in Canada have plummeted by 89%.
Wow.
That's huge. And they're also tackling abuse within the international student program as well.
Yeah, there were some concerns about people, using student visas just as a way to get into Canada without any intention of studying.
Right.
So to counter that, they've implemented a system to verify those acceptance letters.
Oh.
So making sure students are actually enrolled in real programs.
So they're not just faking it.
Exactly.
And the results speak for themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Illegal U.S. crossings by Canadian study permit holders have dropped by 91%.
Huge.
It's like they're closing loopholes left and right.
They are. It's definitely a big push to tighten up the system. And it's not just about preventing illegal crossings.
Right.
They're also trying to root out misconduct by immigration representatives.
Yeah, unfortunately, there have been instances of these unethical consultants who take advantage of, vulnerable applicants.
Exactly. And so they're proposing all these new regulations to try and address this, including some pretty hefty fines for those who break the rule.
Yes, they're not playing around.
Nope.
And they're also looking at strengthening the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants to ensure better oversight and accountability.
Right.
So it's all about protecting the applicants.
Yes.
And making sure they're getting accurate and ethical advice.
That's crucial.
Right.
It's about maintaining trust in the whole system.
So we're seeing kind of a two-pronged approach here, right?
Yeah.
Strengthening border security to prevent illegal crossings, and then bolstering the immigration system.
Exactly.
To ensure its integrity and to protect those vulnerable applicants.
And that interconnectedness is key. Both elements need to be working together to really achieve that goal.
Right.
a more controlled, efficient, and fair system.
But the question is, are these measures actually working?
Right. Are we seeing results?
To answer that, we need to dive into the data and see what the impact of these changes really is.
Let's get into it. Thankfully, Canada has been keeping really good track of the results, and they've even released a progress report
Oh, that's great.
outlining all the key outcomes.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty here.
Hmm.
What does the data tell us?
Okay.
Are these measures actually making a difference?
Well, the numbers are looking pretty good.
Okay.
You know, that surge in illegal southbound movement back in 2024 we were talking about.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Well, since implementing all these measures, they've actually seen an 89% reduction from those peak levels.
89%. Wow, that's a big drop.
It is.
What do you think contributed the most to that success?
It's probably, a bunch of things working together.
Yeah.
The increased surveillance, especially that aerial intelligence task force that's going to be making it a lot harder to cross undetected.
Uh-huh.
The stricter enforcement of the visa requirements and the crackdown on, fraudulent applications, those have played a part too.
Okay.
And of course, closing that flag polling loophole that took away a big incentive for people trying to game the system.
So it's not just one thing, it's this whole, multi-pronged approach working together.
Right, like a bunch of little things adding up.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems to be working.
It is. And it's not just about stopping those crossings either. They've also seen a 77% reduction in those irregular asylum claims compared to the same time last year.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is.
So they're deterring people from even trying to cross illegally, and they're weeding out the unfounded asylum claims.
Right. They're hitting their targets.
It seems like it.
And remember when they closed that flag polling loophole
Yeah.
that was supposed to free up a bunch of resources?
Right. For both sides?
Yeah, for Canada and the U.S.
Yeah. Did that actually make a difference?
It totally did.
Okay.
They think it's freed up something like 4,000 to 8,000 days of work
Wow.
for U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
That's incredible. Think of all the time and resources they can now dedicate to, other security issues.
Right, exactly. It's a perfect example of how even a small change can have a big impact. And all of this is happening while Canada and the U.S. are still, strengthening their partnership.
Right, because that's more important now than ever,
Yeah.
especially with, these shared threats like drug trafficking and transnational organized crime.
That's right.
What are they doing on that front?
Well, they've got a few joint initiatives going on.
Okay.
Like those integrated border enforcement teams and those joint threat assessments. And they're actively trying to enhance information sharing and intelligence gathering.
Makes sense. The more they know about each other's operations,
Yeah.
the threats that they're facing, the better equipped they are to respond.
Exactly. It's about combining their knowledge and their resources
Yeah.
to create a more secure border.
Right, for both countries.
Exactly.
So it sounds like Canada is making some real progress
It seems like it.
in strengthening their border security and their immigration system using technology and policy changes and this increased collaboration.
Right.
But what does this mean for the average person?
Right. The everyday people.
Yeah, who's, crossing the border or thinking about immigrating to Canada?
That's a great question. While these measures are showing all this positive stuff, in terms of security and efficiency,
Right.
we have to think about how this is going to impact people.
Right.
Will it become harder for legitimate travelers and immigrants to get across the border?
That's a valid concern, right?
It is.
Because this increased scrutiny and these tighter controls, while they're important for security, could create barriers for people who aren't a threat at all.
It's such a tough balancing act.
It is.
On the one hand, you have a more secure border, which could bring economic benefits,
Right.
smoother trade, increased investment.
Uh-huh.
But then you have to consider what it might do to people who are seeking asylum or those with legitimate reasons to travel or migrate.
Yeah. Will a stricter border deter those fleeing persecution from seeking refuge in Canada?
Right.
Will the STCA, with all its complexities and legal battles, continue to be a factor in all of this?
These are the tough questions.
Yeah.
They require a lot of thought. We need to make sure that while we're deterring those unfounded claims,
Right.
we don't accidentally create obstacles for people with legitimate needs.
It's a difficult balance to strike.
It really is.
So while the data shows that Canada's efforts are working,
Yeah.
there's still so much to consider in terms of the long-term implications.
Yeah, it's absolutely a lot to think about.
It really does feel like we're at a crossroads right now.
Yeah.
Canada's definitely taking action to reinforce their border and, reform their immigration system.
Mm-hmm.
And the data's showing some positive results.
Yeah.
But with any big change, There are always those ripple effects.
Yeah, it's like throwing a stone into a pond, right?
Right.
The initial splash is obvious, but the ripples keep spreading outwards,
Yeah.
interacting with the current.
And those ripples are what we have to consider now, right? Like,
Yeah.
how might these changes impact travel and migration between the
Yeah.
U.S. and Canada?
Yeah.
Will it be easier or harder to cross the border?
That's the big question, and honestly, it could be a bit of both.
Right.
We could see longer wait times at crossings because of the extra scrutiny,
Yeah.
and there might be more of an emphasis on documentation and background checks, which could lead to more people being denied entry.
That would really impact, like, tourism and casual travel, right?
For sure.
Like families that go back and forth for visits or vacations, they'd probably face a lot more hurdles.
And for businesses that rely on, cross-border trade or moving their employees around,
Yeah.
this could be a big logistical headache and, drive up costs.
But couldn't you also argue that a more secure and efficient border could actually be good for the economy?
Absolutely.
Right.
If trade flows better and it feels more secure, it could attract investment and boost the economy.
Right. So it's complicated.
It is.
There's good and bad.
There's pros and cons, for sure.
And we can't forget about the human side of it either.
Oh, of course not.
For those with legitimate reasons to travel or move, like students going to study abroad or families trying to reunite,
Right.
they might have to go through a much tougher application process.
Yeah, way more paperwork and probably a lot longer to get approvals.
And what about people seeking asylum?
Yeah, that's a big one.
A more tightly controlled border could be a big problem for them.
Yeah. Will it be harder for refugees to reach safety?
Right.
Will the SDCA, with all its baggage and legal challenges, will that continue to decide who gets protection and who doesn't?
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
While the goal is to be more secure and streamline things,
Right.
we can't forget about the people.
Yeah, their stories are important.
It's about finding that balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Security and compassion,
Right.
control and openness.
Finding that sweet spot.
It's tough.
It is, and this is where, people being informed really matters. Staying engaged, having these discussions, advocating for policies that are both secure and humane.
Right.
That's how we figure this out.
So for you listening at home,
Yeah.
the takeaway is this.
Mm-hmm.
Things are changing when it comes to crossing borders and, migration.
Right.
And these changes could affect you whether you're planning a trip or thinking about moving or just, worried about these global trends.
Yeah, the choices we make, they have consequences.
Yeah.
Staying informed, being critical, having those conversations.
Right.
That's how we build a good future.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway.
Yeah.
Recognizing that it's on all of us to create a world that's not just safe, but also fair and kind.
Well said. It's about building a future where everyone has a chance, no matter where they come from or where they're going.